Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your research, your reports, and distill them into pure, actionable insight. Today, we're tackling a customer request, a core question for anyone in hospitality. What is the actual measurable return on investment for training your staff?
It's a great question, and I think the first thing our sources suggest is that we have to reframe it slightly.
Oh, so.
Well, too often, training is seen as just a cost, a line on a budget that's easy to cut when times get tough, but the data shows you absolutely have to see it as an investment.
An investment, okay.
All right.
And with any investment, you want to know the potential return. Yeah. So before we get into the weeds, what's the big headline number? What's the most eye-opening metric you found?
It's pretty significant. When you look at really effective, well-designed training programs in this industry, the ROI figures, they range from 200% all the way up to 500%.
Wow, 200 to 500%. And just to be clear for everyone, that ROI is calculated as the net program benefits divided by the program costs times 100. To get numbers like that, you're doing a lot more than just preventing mistakes.
You absolutely are. That return really comes from two sides of the coin. There's the offense, generating new revenue and efficiency. And then there's the defense, which is mitigating some really catastrophic financial risks.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think it makes sense to start with defense. Sometimes the easiest ROI to prove is the money you don't lose. And hospitality is, well, it's famous for high turnover. So what's the real cost of just letting people walk out the door?
The costs are massive
Right.
and immediate. Our sources give us some very concrete industry numbers. To replace just one hourly employee, you're looking at an average cost of around $6,500.
$6,500. And for a manager?
That's where it really gets painful. It balloons to about $50,000. And that's everything. Recruiting, background checks, the lost productivity when that position is empty, all of it.
Those numbers just scale up so fast. I think there's a scenario in the sources, right?
There is, and it's a good one. Let's imagine a pretty average mid-size hotel, say 115 employees and maybe 8 managers.
Okay.
Now, let's just project what we could call modest turnover. 75% for the hourly staff and 25% for the managers.
Well, 75% is modest. 3 out of 4 people leave every year.
It sounds incredibly high, but in certain environments, it points to systemic problems where, yeah, that's the reality. And in those places, a lack of training and advancement is a huge factor.
So what's the total cost in that scenario?
When you run the numbers, the total turnover cost comes to $626,500.
Over $500,000 in 1 year. Just gone. When you put a number like that on the table, a training budget starts to look less like a cost and more like, an insurance policy.
It's a critical defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Exactly. Training isn't just about skills, it's liability management. And that brings us to the second big risk.
The legal side of things.
The legal exposure, yes. The operational costs are one thing. But the sources point to a really critical legal case, Miller versus Walmart stores.
Right, the Wisconsin Supreme Court case.
Yeah.
That one is fascinating because it essentially established that you can sue an employer for negligent hiring, but also for negligent training and supervision.
Which means there is a clear legal duty for an employer to properly train their staff to avoid, foreseeable harm. If someone isn't trained on a safety procedure and a guest gets hurt, the hotel can be held liable.
And that duty increases with the employee's authority, right? A poorly trained manager is a much bigger legal risk than a new hire.
Much bigger. So for any manager listening, the takeaway is that your paperwork is part of your defense. Every signed training checklist, every skills test, that's documentation that you're doing your due diligence. It can even show up in lower worker compensation claims.
So training saves you money on turnover, and it saves you money on legal risk. We've established the defense. But to get to that 500% ROI, we need to go on offense. So let's look at how targeted training can actually generate positive returns. Here's where it gets really interesting with the case studies.
Yeah, we have a great, really straightforward example of labor savings with room attendants.
Tell us about that one.
So this was a program for 6 room attendants. The training was super focused. It was all about how to stock and account for their supply carts more efficiently.
Okay, so what was the problem they were trying to solve?
The old process was just inefficient. They were making multiple trips back to the supply closet during a shift, which was wasting a lot of time. The goal of the training was pretty simple: save 5 minutes for every room they cleaned.
And did they hit it?
They got very close. The training resulted in a 4-minute reduction per room. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but you calculate that out.
It adds up.
It adds up fast. It's 80 minutes saved per person per day. So across those 6 people, over 30 days, That's 14,400 minutes saved.
which is 240 hours of labor.
Exactly. And at the wage cost in the source, $10 an hour for wages and benefits, that single piece of training saved the hotel $2,400 a month.
That's a pure hard dollar ROI you can see on day one. And okay, maybe $10 an hour is a bit low for today, but the principle is the same. You identify a bottleneck, these repeated trips, and you train to eliminate it.
That's the key insight. And efficiency isn't just about movement. It can be about fundamental skills, too.
Which brings us to the Sunnyside Beach Hotel example. That one was about a language barrier.
Right. So management there saw a productivity issue with their groundskeepers. Many of them didn't speak English as their primary language, and they were only prepping 4 greens per shift when the target was 6.
So it wasn't just about chatting with guests. The language barrier was affecting the actual job handling materials, scheduling, using equipment the right way.
Precisely. So the hotel did something smart. They set up an ESL course, English as a second language, and they really supported the staff who was on site after their shifts, and they paid them their hourly wage to attend.
And they tailored the course.
They did. They mixed job-specific English terms with more general life skills, and the results were quantifiable.
What was the number?
The groundskeepers who took the course saw a consistent, significant productivity boost compared to a control group who didn't. The estimated return on investment for that program was 37%.
37%. That's a fantastic example because it shows that ROI comes from both these tiny efficiency gains, saving a few minutes here and there, and from tackling these huge fundamental barriers like language.
It does. But these great results depend on one thing:
The quality of the training design itself.
the quality of the upfront planning. Our sources show that salaries are the biggest chunk of training costs, maybe 75 or 80%. But the budget itself is mostly spent in 3 phases: design, development, and implementation. Each of those can be 30 to 35% of the total budget.
So if you mess up the design phase, you've already wasted a third of your money on a program that's doomed to fail.
You've got it. That's why the first step to getting that big ROI is a really thorough needs assessment. You have to know exactly what problem you're trying to solve before you spend a dime.
So you're not just training for the sake of training. You're looking for a specific deficiency to fix or an opportunity to get better. And how do you do that in a practical sense?
Well, you could interview your top performers to see what they do differently, or you analyze guest complaints to find patterns. You have to find that hidden need first.
That makes sense. Okay, so now let's talk about the benefits you can't always put a dollar sign on so easily. Not all ROI shows up on a balance sheet, especially in a service business.
Correct. The intangible benefits, what you might call the behavioral ROI, are just as critical, and the sources break it down by who benefits.
For the employees, it's about more than just a new skill. It's increased self-confidence, better motivation, and getting them ready for a promotion, which builds your talent pipeline internally.
And for the guests, the benefit is obvious. The quality of the service goes up, of course. But the key phrase in the research is an increased pleasantness in service encounters.
That idea of pleasantness is everything. A check-in can be technically perfect, transactionally complete, but if it's not pleasant, you don't build loyalty. You just have a customer. Training soft skills is what turns transactions into relationships.
And that loyalty turns into revenue. It also creates this amazing feedback loop for the property itself. The data shows that higher job satisfaction among staff is strongly correlated with higher returns for investors. Managers who train their people see lower turnover in their own departments.
It's a virtuous cycle. Happier employees lead to happier guests, which leads to happier investors. The sources mentioned a company called Club Corp that really leaned into this idea.
They have a fantastic system called leveling. They basically bake the value of training right into the pay structure. Pay grade increases are directly linked to an employee's training rec unit.
That's such a powerful idea. It puts the employee in the driver's seat. They don't have to wait for an annual review to get a raise. They can actively earn it.
It makes them a partner in their own development. They can increase their own wages by going to training and then passing tests to prove they learned the material. It's a true win-win.
So assuming you've done your needs assessment and you have a smart system in place, the training itself has to actually stick.
The methodology is key. The sources point to structured methods, like the TRAIN acronym.
Right. TRAIN is teach, repeat, ask, imitate, and no good performance. It's simple, but it builds in that repetition that's so important for adult learners.
But even the best training course can fail. The ROI is really secured by what happens after everyone leaves the room.
The follow-up.
The follow-up. We know that new skills disappear fast if you don't use them. The supervisor has to be the guardian of that investment. They have to check in, provide the right equipment, and give people a chance to practice.
And crucially, they can't punish people for trying the new way.
That is the absolute #1 rule. If a manager sees an employee using a new technique from training and says, "That's too slow, just do it the old way," you have just wasted an entire training budget. Instantly.
You've just killed your own investment.
You've created a self-defeating loop. So management has to be all in on supporting the new behaviors.
So let's wrap this up. When we look at all the source material, the ROI of hospitality training isn't some vague concept. It's a very real compound effect. You're saving thousands, up to $50,000 per employee you don't lose to turnover.
And you're getting measurable productivity gains, like that 37% ROI on the language course, or the direct labor savings from the efficiency programs.
And when you put all of that together, the defensive savings, the efficiency gains, the motivational intangibles, you get to those industry-wide returns of 200 to 500%. It's clearly an investment, not an expense.
No question.
So, connecting this all to the bigger picture, we know soft skills are the backbone of this industry. But they're also the hardest to measure. Attitude, that pleasantness we talked about, it's vital. So that leaves a final question for you to think about.
Given that attitude is so intangible, how would you design a feedback loop to actually capture the ROI of that attitude change 6 months after a soft skills course? Could you use proxy metrics maybe, like tracking a decrease in serious guest complaints or an increase in positive mentions in online reviews?
A fascinating challenge. We hope this deep dive has given you the metrics and the strategy you need to see staff development not as a cost to be cut, but as the engine for growth and risk management that the data shows it can be.